chat with Senator Rand Paul about a huge mistake the federal government is making. Biden fails at economics. I actually defend a Democrat. And pro-fat TikTok is back on its BS. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my new daily series where I take on the craziest ideas in our politics and across the internet from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around. And if you're a regular viewer but you're not subscribed, you know who you are. Please do join us. We're growing so fast. It just crossed 120,000, and that is so awesome. Don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your thoughts as we go along, because I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now, without further ado, here's my interview with Senator Rand Paul about why he thinks the US is making a huge mistake by moving to ban TikTok. Senator Paul, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I'm sure you know, TikTok just filed a big lawsuit moving against the push out of the federal government to ban it, citing in part First Amendment grounds. Do you think they'll be successful on that front?
You know, I think not only do they have a case, because the First Amendment, the company is a medium for speech, is a First Amendment case. I think Apple also will have a case, since they're banning the distribution of this through the App Store and through the Google App Store as well. But also, I think the people who use the medium, I think, will likely sue as well. There's supposedly 170 million Americans using TikTok. I think they all have a First Amendment case as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits here, and I think a strong case that you can't limit. It's interesting when you look at the bill and you hear the people that are complaining about TikTok, they say, well, this might happen. The Chinese government might get this data. So what they're doing is they've made a bill basically on conjecture, not on proof. And in our country, typically you have to be convicted of something before they take something from you. So there's also a Fifth Amendment case that there hasn't been due process before they're going to take something of enormous wealth. And imagine what happens to the wealth of this on the day after the deadline, when it's banned and they're no longer can be sold. The other problem with selling it is you want to sell something worth $100 billion. The people who might buy it are other big tech industry giants, who the same people are then saying, oh, you can't buy it because that would be antitrust. You'll be a monopoly. So they're going to say, oh, Facebook can't buy it, Google can't buy it, YouTube can't buy it. Well, who can buy it? You know, I mean, it's a really, I think that the constitutional case against this TikTok ban is very strong, and I'm hopeful that the court will strike it down.
So what about the arguments you hear that say essentially, well, our products, our social media apps are banned in China, so turnabout is fair play?
I think John Tamny had the best article on this. He says, you know, the best way to counteract Chinese authoritarians is to become Chinese authoritarians. It's like, well, yes, they banned speech. They banned TikTok. Do we want to emulate the people we're, criticizing and saying, oh, these people are so dastardly, the communists are so bad, we don't want them scraping our data, so we're going to behave like they do in banning speech platforms? The first thing to understand is all social media and anybody you deal with on the internet is scraping your data, and it's one of these exchanges, and people either choose to deal with the internet or not. The reason the internet is free is not because it's free. Like everything else, it has a cost, and the cost is done through advertising. So when you order shoes on the internet, you're going to get more pictures of shoes sent to you. You order golf equipment. I can't tell you all the advertisements I get for golf equipment, So, and it's one of these trade-offs we deal with. And if I don't want to share my data, I guess I've become convinced that most of the commercial aspects of it are innocuous, in the sense that I don't think they're trying to do anything to me that I think is harmful. I don't want the government scraping data, because I worry if the government has police power, they can come after me. So I don't want government getting my data. As far as the communist government, if there's proof that the communist government's taking your data, I would think people would leave TikTok by droves. I think people just don't believe it's happening.
Yeah, I don't think they do believe that. And a lot of the concerns are largely hypothetical. But what do you make of the fact that so many members of your party, the GOP, and so many of your allies in conservative media who you typically agree with on questions of free speech and big tech censorship and all this, seem to be rallying around and supporting one of the biggest acts of government censorship of the internet of my lifetime?
It is. It's, realize it's all the Democrats too, but it's more disappointing to see your friends actually on this side of this issue. And people typically who have supported the First Amendment seem to think there's a national security exemption. But there's no national security exemption to the First Amendment. And I am very disappointed in some people who are otherwise good on this. And really, it is all based on conjecture, but also it's based on falsehood. I mean, I was on, Fox News, and Brian Kilmeade was going on and on about the Chinese Communist government owns TikTok. Well, that's verifiably false. They do not own TikTok.
Right.
TikTok's owned by international investors, including some Americans. It's also 20% of TikTok's owned by their employees. 7,000 of their employees are Americans. So it's like there's a strong case that you cannot simply go and take an American's property without due process, national security or otherwise. The other thing about national security is if you think there's a national security concern, government probably would get away with passing generalized restrictions on all companies. But naming one company and saying to this one company, we think you might be doing this, or we think someday the government might get this data, and therefore we're banning you, is a very specific bill. And the Constitution has a provision saying you can't have a bill of attainder. And a bill of attainder was when you go after a specific company by name. So I think they have so many legal fronts here. And you also have to understand that 3 times already the federal courts have struck down bans as unconstitutional, bans specifically on TikTok.
So I also find it hard to imagine that because there are so many Americans working at TikTok, that if the Communist Chinese Party was actually mining our data or spying on us through our cameras while we sleep at night, that they wouldn't somehow, somebody involved wouldn't have blown the whistle on that, wouldn't have raised the alarm about that when you have thousands of Americans involved in the day-to-day operations of this company. If it was really the CCP spying machine they seem to make it out to be, don't you think that somebody there involved would blow the whistle on that?
The other thing you have to understand about this is that this regulation is written loose enough that it could capture other companies as well. So it says a company that's under the influence or control of a foreign adversary. Well, the 2017 law that they refer to in China that says the Chinese government has the right to collect any data they want on any company in China already applies to Apple. Apple went ahead and said that any telephone they sell, any iPhone that they sell in China, that they'll keep the data on servers actually owned by the Communist government of China in China, and that they will submit to the 2017 law. But I don't hear people saying that they're going to confiscate Apple's company and make them sell, and I'm not for that. All I'm saying is that if you write a law with such a broad sweep and broad brush, there's a danger that you'll catch up other companies in this. And I think the law as written could apply to Apple. That's why I think the law is terrible and ought to be struck down.
Well, and it also gives the executive branch the authority to invoke this power again in the future without the Congress even voting. Doesn't that concern you? I mean, at bare minimum, shouldn't we have our representatives actually voting on this kind of drastic measure?
And there's a really strong principle they're not quite getting here, that we're going to give the executive branch the power to do this, but it isn't required to have a conviction. And this has basically been one of the big parts of American justice, is that you're presumed to be innocent, whether you're accused of an actual crime, or whether you're accused of a regulatory malfeasance, or you're accused of cooperating with somebody. There has to be some kind of trial and some kind of proof. We don't just take someone's company based on an accusation. And the fact that this could be applied to other companies, I think, should worry us all. But there's a huge First Amendment issue here, not only just for TikTok proper, for the people that host TikTok, which would be Apple's App Store or Google's App Store, and also for other companies that do business in China. There's a host of other companies. The Springer Nature publishes Nature magazine, and they were accused and actually did take down 1,000 articles that are published in China that have to do with Tibet or Taiwan or things that the Chinese government does. They submitted to China's will and actually self-censored or censored and took stuff down from Nature. Does that mean they're under the influence of a foreign adversary? Does that mean Springer Nature could be taken over, or their app could be taken over by the U.S. government and force them to sell? So there's all kinds of crazy logical applications that could come from this law that should have warned us all. But right now there's a hysteria in Washington. It's a drumbeat against China, but it's also a drumbeat that could lead to war. And so I think we need to have some saner voices, and we do need to have dialogue. Look, I'm no fan of Chinese communism. I wrote a whole book, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up, about their government covering up for the origins of that virus. But at the same time, I'm not for ending trade with China. I think that's a recipe for disaster and possibly a recipe for war.
I do want to ask you about one thing. Your critics have really harped on the fact that a TikTok investor has given you money in the past and said that that's what's motivating your opposition to the ban. For me, that would really only make sense if you were doing something out of character. But to be honest, you vote against the federal government doing most things, so it seems in character for me. But what do you say to that criticism that people are making?
It's kind of the ridiculous argument people make with the NRA. The NRA gives me money, but I'm also for the Second Amendment. I think they give me money because I am for the Second Amendment. It's not the reverse, that because I get money from the NRA, I've decided I'm going to support your right to own a gun. No, it's the libertarian philosophy is very consistent on the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. The things that I've written and talked about, you're right, are completely consistent with this stand. And it would sort of be the opposite. Let's say Facebook gave me $1 million to some campaign, and all of a sudden now I am for the TikTok ban. I think you could make the argument, wow, he's inconsistent. He's not taking the libertarian position. He's actually taking the opposite position because he got money from Facebook. And so, no, I think it's quite consistent. And, the relationship with that donor goes back probably 20 years before there was any investment or before there wasn't even a TikTok. So the people who make that argument are trying to basically make an argument against my character as opposed to making an argument against the argument.
All right. Well, Senator Paul, thanks so much for your time. All right, guys. Hope you found that interesting. Don't forget to hit the like button and comment. Let me know who else you'd like to see me feature or interview on the show. Now, let's talk about Joe Biden, because the president just got caught in 4K, totally failing at economics. So in an interview with CNN, Biden essentially blamed high grocery prices and the inflation that we've seen, including shrinkflation, where products get smaller for the same price. He blamed it all on corporate greed. Take a look.
What about, but there's real pain. Grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30% since the beginning of the pandemic. And people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time, really, in the past 30 years. That's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is. And it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your
Same
program.
price for a smaller bottle of juice or something.
For example, Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed. It's corporate greed. And we've got to deal with it, and that's what I'm working on.
You hear that, guys? It's all just those greedy, dastardly corporations. Nothing is his fault. Nothing has anything to do with any of his policies. The Federal Reserve printing trillions of dollars out of thin air, that couldn't have had any inflationary effect. Massive stimulus bills from both Republicans and Democrats spending trillions of dollars we don't have, that couldn't have any effect. Heck, even global supply chain issues or high fuel costs, those things, they couldn't be the explanation either. No, Biden is blaming the boogeyman of corporate greed for the bad state of grocery prices and the cost of living under his presidency. It's a cop-out, and it doesn't make any sense. Corporations are always greedy, babe. That didn't suddenly change in 2021. Think about it. The logic he's suggesting would suggest that in the areas where prices haven't gone up as much as groceries, those CEOs and those corporations are just extra generous. They're less greedy than those evil grocery CEOs. Babe, the math isn't mathing. Economists nearly universally reject the idea that corporate greed is the cause of high prices, because corporate greed is always existing. They always want to charge whatever high price they can, and that's not what changed to cause inflation. They didn't suddenly explode in their levels of greed. There are a bunch of other explanations, but President Biden doesn't want to talk about those because some of them trace back to his policies. What do you guys think? Are you buying it? Are you falling for the spin? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, it's time for me to take a stand and defend a Democratic politician who I think is coming under some unfair criticism. Now, I am really no fan of New York Congressman Jamaal Bowman, who is a pretty far-left extreme Democrat, an AOC-style member of the squad, but a new media narrative targeting him is trying to smear him as a conspiracy theorist, which he might be, I really don't know, but they're doing it in a way that I think is really bad faith and not fair. So here's the headline about him that's popping off. Squad Representative Jamaal Bowman had secret YouTube page subscribed to channels that shared anti-Semitic, flat earth, and Illuminati conspiracy videos. Report. Squad member Representative Jamaal Bowman allegedly maintained a personal YouTube account that subscribed to users pushing outrageous conspiracy theories, many with roots in anti-Semitism. As recently as last month, the Bronx and Westchester Democrat was creating playlists of videos using the screen name Inner Peace, according to the Daily Beast. The outlet reported that the Bowman channel followed troves of accounts peddling bonkers claims about aliens, flat earth theory, UFOs, and the Illuminati. So they basically went through the accounts that he was subscribed to and found their craziest video titles and then tried to tie him to that as if it's proof he believes or is interested in those conspiracy theories or those outrageous claims. This is kind of a ridiculous guilt by association attempt that doesn't make any sense if you understand how YouTube and social media actually work. People follow all sorts of stuff, and it's not an endorsement, and it doesn't mean they agree with every video posted or everything the person's ever said. I subscribe to tons of woke LGBT YouTubers, for example, because I want to know what they're saying, and I subscribe to right-wing YouTubers and content creators that I don't agree with on a lot of things, like Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh, because I want to know what they're saying. But under this logic, somebody could come up with a list of crazy video titles from them and say that that's somehow associated with me or shows my beliefs. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's not fair. Jamaal Bowman might well be a conspiracy theorist. I don't know. But what I do know is that this media attack proves basically nothing and just seems like a bad faith smear. And I'm going to give it to you straight on stuff like this, regardless of whether the politician involved is a Republican or a Democrat. And if that means defending a politician who I disagree with on almost everything, I'll do that, because that's what I think is right. And I don't support these kinds of guilt by association smear tactics from the media, whether they're targeting someone I like or someone I don't agree with. I still don't support it either way. What do you guys think? How would this logic apply to your YouTube subscriptions? Let me know in the comments below. And now it's time for Delulu Epidemic, my segment where I spotlight people who are letting their stupid show. Today, this woke brat is mad at their mom for drinking Starbucks? When I told my mother the reasons why I don't go to Starbucks, this is her response. It sickens me how many people have this mind process. And then the texts that are linked here say, yeah, I don't like Starbucks. Their money goes to support murdering children in Palestine. That's why I never go there anymore. And the mom replies, well, I love the mocha chip frappuccino. I love the mom's nonchalant, savage reply here. And I'm probably going to do a deeper dive on this soon, but I just want to say that this person is yelling at their mom over something that doesn't exist. Something that's just made up. Starbucks doesn't send any money to the Israeli government or the IDF. In fact, they've donated money to humanitarian aid in Gaza. The whole thing about how shopping at Starbucks or buying your mocha lattes from there funds the Israel war is just something TikTok seems to have caught on and just spread over and over again without actually checking or having a basis in fact, like one of those myths that gets repeated over and over again that people just believe it and they forget to actually look into it and see if it's true. But it's not. So you're just scolding and publicly shaming your mom for no reason. Which honestly, even if your mom did say something problematic in your texts, it's a shitty move to publicly shame them or try to humiliate your mom so people will give you attaboys online. So to this woke brat, your Delulu is showing. All right, up next, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, where I react to the craziest and funniest ideas from the Clock app. Don't forget to hit that like button and please do consider subscribing. Now this TikToker says that if you're trying to lose weight, she's mad at you and you're probably ugly. Let's take a look at what this user, who self-describes as feminist land whale. Guys, I'm not being mean. I'm not saying that. That is the username of this account. And she describes herself as a fat, mean, bald, femme lesbian. With all that delightful context, let's watch the video.
I'm so sorry, but if you post that you're trying to lose weight, like, I'm gonna unfollow you. I've had to unfollow so many people this week because everyone is like, I'm taking a new medication for weight loss. I'm doing this new thing for weight loss. I'm doing for weight loss. I'm sick of it. You can be fat and healthy the same way you can be thin and unhealthy. So don't hide behind this facade that your weight loss is all for health benefits because we know that's not true. We know you're losing weight so you can look better, whatever the that means. Maybe you're just ugly, just a thought. But I am so sick of it. I'm so sick of especially you fat bitches currently who have built your platforms on being fat and gained hundreds of thousands, even millions of followers because you've been this body positive queen for people. And now what? You've got the fame, you've got the followers, so you're done. You've got what you wanted, so now you're gonna go turn your back on all these people who have supported you? Get the out of my face.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there from the feminist land whale. Again, that's her name for herself. I'm not being mean. Start with the last point, which maybe has a little bit of legitimacy to it, that this person is frustrated with body positivity overweight activists who built a brand online as overweight and proud of it and are now losing weight. There's two ways to look at that. One is that they're hypocrites and frauds, which seems to be this person's perspective. But the other is that they've seen the tragedies pointed out by my friend Blair White.
Just because I'm fat, that doesn't invalidate the things that I say.
She died.
You ready to get supersized?
She died too.
Today I've got the big Fruit Loop.
He's dead.
Join me on my Fat Positive radio show.
Which didn't last long because she died.
And they're waking up and realizing that this was a mistake and they're putting their health first. I think if it's in the latter category, and as long as they're open that they were wrong and they admit it, that's a good thing. And I welcome them to the right side of this debate and to a healthier and happier life. As for this person's notion that, well, fat people can be healthy and skinny people can be unhealthy, sure, but that doesn't change the fact that being overweight and obese hugely increases your chances of having negative health issues. That's like saying that because somebody can smoke cigarettes and never get lung cancer, and because somebody can never smoke and get lung cancer, then therefore smoking really isn't unhealthy, and what you really need to worry about is just the lung cancer. Like, no, babe, that's not how logic works, okay? Also, she seems so mad that people would want to lose weight to look better. Like why? That's fine. You should be putting your health first, of course, because if you go too far with obsessing over looking good, you can end up making unhealthy decisions, but it's okay to take pride in your appearance and want to look trim and healthy and pursue fitness or diet in order to do that. That's fine if people want to do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And no, it doesn't mean that people are ugly, okay? Ultimately, I feel kind of bad for this person because I feel like a lot of her rage is probably coming from a place of insecurity and self-doubt. I hope that she can join the others in the body positivity community who can wake up and see what's going on here before it's too late. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button, and please do consider subscribing. Now, before we wrap up today's episode, I'm going to read a few of the comments you left on the last video. One person writes, I love how more crazies are trying to take you down now. Badge of honor. Yeah, this uptick in woke YouTubers, coming for me and making hate videos about me, I take it as honestly a compliment that I'm getting noticed and making a difference, and they feel the need to try to smear me and shut me down. If people weren't listening, if my message wasn't getting out there and making a difference, they probably wouldn't bother. Another person says, I'm a person with PTSD. The only time I ever want trigger warnings is before someone shows me media pertaining to explicit and detailed talk about rape and abuse. That's it. Maybe just me though. I hate how trigger warnings have been turned into this thing. I actually completely agree, and this was the original use of trigger warnings. And I think in that limited context, it's perfectly fine. You probably don't want to show somebody a video of a sexual assault if they've experienced that and they're not prepared for it. I think that's totally valid. But somewhere along the line, it morphed into trigger warning, you're about to hear ideas that are upsetting. And that, I think, is a totally infantilizing and counterproductive endeavor to engage in. Somebody else said, honestly, Brad Polumbo sounds like a gourmet Brooklyn sandwich shop more than anything. So, Brad, what's your favorite sandwich? Another person said, he doesn't look like he eats too many sandwiches. I do too, eat sandwiches, okay? I don't know, I like a couple different sandwiches. My kind of classic go-to is just turkey, cheese, lettuce, and mayonnaise. Then I also can always go for a good meatball sub, or a buffalo chicken wrap, or a Caesar wrap. Another person says, Brad Polumbo sounds like a Netflix reboot where Columbo is a chiseled meathead detective in California. And I'm here for it. I don't know really how to interpret or respond to that comment. Another person said, Brad is nothing like Ben Shapiro. Oh my lord. Yeah, I think the only way we might be similar is in the whole kind of debate cultural, political commentary perceived as right-wing sort of thing, but we have very different ideologies and beliefs and worldviews and personalities. So yeah, I also don't think it's too great a comparison, although Emma wasn't the first one to make it. To be honest with you, I've heard it before. Some people will call me a Walmart Ben Shapiro, which gives me a little bit of a giggle, to be honest, but hey, whatever. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my new daily series. Please do consider subscribing and sticking around. It would really mean so much to me. Don't forget to hit that like button regardless, and please do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. We'll talk again tomorrow.